Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Larry Wolf, and I'm a managing partner with Edgile. Many of you may have attended some of our other webinars in the past. We've had a series of them. We will continue to do so through the end of the year, and we do publish a 6-month out view of some of the webinars we're putting together. So continue to kind of look at our homepage, and you'll see as we start to develop additional content and webinar material as time moves on. Today, as Dan said, today we will be covering internal and external identities, leveraging a IAM platform, so an integrated platform. And our focus will be, the case study will be with healthcare, and we're going to show how you can secure third parties, so really from a B2B perspective, and then integrating that into the environment. Let me take a moment and introduce our speakers and guests. And starting with Tarun Vazirani. Tarun is a managing director with Edgile. Additionally, Matt Ratcliffe, who is a AVP with the healthcare organization of SailPoint. Tanya Erickson, who is a modern workplace security and compliance technical specialist for Microsoft. And then Alex Dunker, who's a senior consultant with Edgile, and additionally Frank Drews, who is a senior architect with Edgile. So today's agenda, we're gonna cover kind of introductions of the topic and the overall position that we have. We're gonna walk through a problem statement, and then we're gonna show you a case study from a client and show you what that looks like I said, from a healthcare perspective. It does apply across industries, but we're going to show the case study regarding healthcare today. And then we'll walk through an overview of the solution, and then we'll go through a demo, and then we'll leave about 10-15 minutes at the end for everyone to go ahead and enter questions, or we'll supply some answers to what we have. And again, per Dan's intro, we can follow up later as well if needed. So just kind of to set the stage here, if you're not familiar with Edgile, Edgile's been in business for almost 20 years now, and we have 3 integrated practices, and those practices really focus around these 3 disciplines, and they do overlap in areas. And one of the solutions today, as I said, we're going to show how those worlds can integrate. One of the practices is really focused around identity and access management. We also have a practice that is focused around cloud security and information from a security perspective. And then we also have a practice that's focused around integrated risk management, or which is sometimes coined as GRC. We have a tendency to focus from a strategy first perspective. What that means is we focus from a strategy overall roadmap perspective for clients. We try to bring to bear knowledge from a high level. In some cases, we even will help clients select products, technology products, and also help them with an overall strategy from a business perspective. We do tend to specialize in highly regulated industries such as healthcare, financial services, energy, etc. And what you see from this infographic today is our top partners in those particular disciplines or those particular practices. And today we're going to actually, we have our guests from both Microsoft as well as SailPoint. We're going to show you an integrated approach using Microsoft Azure and SailPoint from a access governance and identity perspective as well. So I'll take a moment here and I guess maybe just touch base that some of you may have seen some of the press releases in the past month or so. Microsoft and SailPoint have developed a partnership, and that partnership really is around both identity governance and the capabilities that SailPoint offers, and that environment actually sitting in Azure, and then Azure providing a lot of the identity and access management services from a cloud perspective in an integrated approach. So let me take a moment and introduce Tanya Erickson from Microsoft, and she can also introduce Matt as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Like Larry said, my name is Tanya Erickson. I am a senior security and compliance technical specialist for healthcare here at Microsoft. The customers that I work with are struggling with how they're going to collaborate with their business partners, their consultants, their vendors, and most importantly, their non-employed providers. So how do you grant the proper access, maintain access, and remove access for those guest users? Historically, you would set those users up within your own organization, but it's really difficult to handle that life cycle management. The question is, does this person need to be in your on-premise directory? So with Azure Active Directory B2B, we have the ability to grant guest access to your environments using your partner organization credentials. So B2B allows partners to manage not only that lifecycle management, but the authentication as well, so that you don't have to within your environment. Next, we have Matt from SailPoint. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, Tanya. Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for joining today. My name is Matt Ratcliffe. I'm the Area Vice President for our healthcare business here at SailPoint. Every day, our healthcare business focuses on helping healthcare customers solve a variety of complex identity governance challenges. And the fact is those challenges truly transverse applications, enterprise and clinical applications, data storage targets like OneDrive, as well as cloud infrastructure like Azure. Two basic examples of some of the complex challenges that our healthcare customers face every day. One is managing complex and dynamic user populations, including not only their internal employees, but also those external identities, business partner relationships. And if anything that we've learned over the last 8 months is those business partner relationships are critically important to the success of the organization. If you think about affiliated physicians, contract nurses, other volunteer staff, these resources are just as important as the internal staff to their patient care charter, but they also provide a new opportunity of risk and exposure. So having a very strong governance strategy around those populations is more important than ever. And then one of the other areas that we really collaborate with organizations like Edgile is also managing those populations, those users that have one-to-many role, and we see that a lot in healthcare. So we look forward to the conversation today. Appreciate everyone joining, and Larry, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, thank you very much, both Microsoft and SailPoint, Tanya and Matt, for joining today. And per my previous slide, SailPoint and Microsoft is a premier partner, both premier partners of ours, and we've been working with both of these companies for many, many years and have received many awards from both companies. So we're looking forward to showing you this integrated solution today. So just to kind of set the stage and back up to a higher level and kind of talk about the industry and the problems that are existing today. Just from an overall perspective, many organizations, so not just in healthcare, but also just from an overall perspective, companies are really struggling with the management of both external and internal identities and the systems in the organization to be able to secure and govern those environments. And per a couple quotes I have here from Gartner, the whole digital transformation environment, and this is a quote actually from 2019, it was the end of last year, where Gartner went out and did a survey with CEOs and senior business executives, and they all had indicated that about 82% of them had indicated that digital transformation is a major initiative for them. And as you can imagine, with what's happened in this pandemic, that has been compressed, and companies are really struggling to try and both take years long of strategic initiatives and compress those into months. And a lot of companies are doing that, and we've been helping many with it, and particularly in healthcare with the remote workforce. And what normally would have been taken multiple years to kind of build that strategy out with things like telehealth, companies are really being forced to try and pull that in, and something that they would have planned in a longer term method and been more cautious about is now being compressed, and it's exposing companies in many ways, and it's something to really try and make sure that you're building a strategy around it at this point in time. So from a digital transformation perspective, this is what we're living with, and you could draw lines in your environment, I'm sure, to some of these different areas, but what I think most enterprises are struggling with is how do you deal with all of the employees, non-employees, suppliers, customers, things or IoT devices, partners and distributors, and how do you connect them, but also, again, going back to securing them as well as governing them is a daunting task. And there's a lot of different products and technologies that are evolving that make it difficult as well to try and figure out exactly what products do we use, as well as how do we integrate these environments. So today we're gonna focus in on a couple different areas, like I had indicated, and we're gonna talk about identity as the perimeter, but we're gonna focus on the partners and the business relationships from a B2B perspective, integrated with a SailPoint IAM on-premise environment, and what that really looks like from an overall lifecycle perspective. And both SailPoint and Microsoft will be the platforms that are integrated per my message earlier. So I'm going to go ahead at this time and turn it over to Tarun, and Tarun's going to kind of walk through the solution. And as I indicated earlier, we're going to go to the demo and kind of show you how some of this is working in some of our client environments. Tarun?
Thank you, Larry. Just as an introduction, I'm Tarun Vazirani. I'm a managing director at Agile and one of the lead IAM strategists here at Agile. If you take a look at it, we can divide these challenges primarily into three buckets. On the left side, you'll notice the first one is a lot of the organizations are primarily worried about third parties having access to the applications and data. In the middle of the screen, the second one we've seen is primarily during these global pandemic times, a lot of the hospital chains we've been working with, they have been struggling really to provide timely access to the vendors, affiliates, and customers. And then on the third one, you'll notice that they were using a lot of these EMR integrations with the identity systems, which, as you're aware, is very, very complex in nature. This is primarily due to the EMR systems really having a complex security model. So the clients in these cases really had to maintain separate spreadsheets, even if after they've done the EMR and SailPoint integration. One thing I'd like to really highlight here in this use case from a security perspective is that there have been really third-party identity management breaches, particularly related to Capital One, Home Depot, NSA breaches, and others. So we take from a solution perspective, we've really been partnering with Microsoft and SailPoint on really a holistic solution using a bring your own identity approach. And we'll cover the solution a little bit more in detail and actually give you a demo of that. So the solution that we achieved is really a fine balance of productivity and security enhancements. So historically, if you see, a lot of the clients have addressed this with some traditional approaches. Approach one is where they would actually federate with each of those partners. The second approach we've generally seen is, managing each of these partner identities either within their own platform or do this via more in an email mechanism way. But both really have their own drawbacks. So approach one, if you notice, from a security perspective, you'll notice there's really no individual user level visibility into it, and you actually do not know about the partner side of the security posture. From an expense standpoint, we noticed that there's the smaller partners really cannot afford the infrastructure to do a lot of these federations, and neither do they have the expertise around it. And as really a lot of these partner and federation grows, there's really a lot of complexity with each of these new partners. And there's also a lot of complexity that grows on the partner side as well. Now, the Second approach we've seen is, as I mentioned, is more from managing these partner identities within their own platform. And that also has its own set of drawbacks. One of the key one being is really access continues even after the external users are terminated. So we've seen a lot of audit findings primarily related to this as well. And as you've noticed with some of these breaches in the past, there's a lot of there's too much default access being given to users. From an expense standpoint, you have to maintain a lot of those passwords, doing a lot of the identity cleanup. You'll have to maintain this overhead of running a separate directory for that. And then from a complexity perspective, the partner now needs to manage and remember another set of username and passwords. So this, as you see, there are more of a historical approaches and traditional approaches we've used. I'd now request Tanya to cover a more modern way of collaborating and really also enhancing the securities.
Yeah, sure. So Azure Active Directory business to business lets you invite guest users to collaborate with your organization. You can securely share your company's applications and services with guest users from another organization while maintaining control over your own corporate data. So the partner uses their own identities and credentials. You don't need to manage external accounts or passwords. You can invite guest users either individually through a bulk invite using a CSV file or through PowerShell. With Azure B2B, you can use authorization policies to protect your corporate content through conditional access, like enforcing multi-factor authentication. So either at the tenant level or the application level. You can allow application and group owners within your organization to manage their own users if you like. They can add guest users directly to any application they want to share access to, whether that is a Microsoft application like Office 365 or SharePoint, or a non-Microsoft application. So any SaaS app or on-premise application that's set up within Azure Active Directory is available for guest users to be granted access to. And then through Azure Active Directory, the My Apps portal, those guest users have a consistent mechanism to access all of the applications they've been granted permission. So when a user leaves that guest organization, that account is automatically soft deleted from your tenant, so they no longer have access. And then after 30 days, it's permanently deleted. Using Azure Active Directory can really give you more of a modern approach to supporting your business partners. Tarun, back to you.
Thank you, Tanya. I take some time out to really talk about a real-life case study. So let's talk a little bit more about the company first. So we have really this large US-based healthcare provider that has operations in both clinical care and research operations. It's a very, very highly regulated environment, and they're subject to a lot of compliance and security frameworks, with particularly SOX, HIPAA, PCI DSS, and from a framework standpoint, the NIST coming in. They also have HITRUST that's applicable to them. And especially during these COVID-19 times, they had a lot of requests to really quickly onboard a lot of these partners and smaller hospital chains and physician practices. And they wanted to do all of this within a matter of hours and days, and really wanted to have a lot of this access in a more structured and unstructured data, and also giving access to the applications. So they wanted to have these external identities that needed to be onboarded. Most of them needed actually access to the EMR systems, such as Epic. And they were also using a lot of the multiple systems right now to really get to achieve all of this. They felt they did not have a holistic identity strategy. They were also running into a lot of audit findings where a lot of users had extra permission and access even after they had been terminated. And overall, they felt that they had a lot of high risk in the organization, and also the audit specifically called them out in this case. Matt, I know you deal with a lot of healthcare clients every day in the SailPoint space. Can you elaborate on something like this you've seen with your current client set?
Yes, thank you, Tarun, and appreciate the question. So there's really a couple core trends that are happening right now with the migration to remote workforce, and even in healthcare, what we're seeing is non-patient facing clinical care staff, whether they're business partners or employees, are now off-site. As well as a large number of IT and IS organizations, or even application owners in some cases. This has accelerated the whole migration to either a pure cloud strategy or perhaps a hybrid strategy where they're managing a combination of both on-premise and cloud-based infrastructure. It's increased the need to look at security frameworks and choose that security framework, one to many, that would fit best with that organization's overall strategy. So we're seeing a lot of our customers pursuing high trust, NIST, and other security frameworks. In order to do this, they do have to demonstrate the ability to securely control access to both applications and data. One of the unique things about SailPoint's governance platform is we can do just that. We can govern access to not only applications, but to data endpoints and even cloud infrastructure. So a large majority now of our healthcare customers are wanting to solve that data governance and that application governance strategy for both internal and business partners through a single lens. The other aspect of this slide that I believe is super important is around the provisioning of fine-grained access in the clinical systems. A lot of times this gets kind of muddied or oversimplified in my opinion, where they're basically asking a question of, hey, can you provision access into an Epic or a Cerner or a Meditech or others? And it ends up being a very binary response. The fact is, and Agile appreciates this and understands this really well, it's 2 to 3 parallel processes that have to happen to actually provision both non-employees and employees into these core clinicals. Integration with credentialing management, integration with learning management. It's more of a complex process. So this platform that you're looking at today, and the combination of Microsoft, Edgile, and SailPoint, really simplifies not only the management of these business partner relationships or the affiliated relationship, but also automates that fine-grained provisioning with what was normally a more complex process.
Great, thank you for that, Matt. Yep. So as we were working with this client, they really came to us with the problem, and they had these 3 goals they wanted to achieve. The first one, as I mentioned about the audit finding, they wanted to really take care of the audit finding as soon as possible, and really, have a certification or user access reviews done on these external users, and really have that one-stop shop for all the identities in that governance bucket. The second one was really automation of these EMR access, and did not want to going forward maintain a lot of the spreadsheets, and really wanted to give access to the users in a matter of hours or days, which they said they were currently taking weeks and a month to do that. And really the third one is, it's from a complexity perspective, they did not want the federation of these additional federation infrastructure to come in, and also wanted to save costs and no longer needed to maintain any of these external users' passwords and identities. So collectively, the Agile, Microsoft, and SailPoint team partnered together to really build a holistic and an integrated solution that would solve this problem for both internal and external identities. One also the key part that they also wanted was really keeping training at a minimum along with this. So we came up with a solution with this integrated solution where they all needed to do was continue using their SailPoint platform to even manage the external identities. Frank, I'd like to hand it over now to you to really cover the conceptual architecture of this integrated solution.
Great, thank you, Tarun. Hello, I'm Frank Drews, Senior Architect at Agile, and I specialize in Microsoft Identity Solutions. So we're going to just talk briefly about how Azure Active Directory, B2B, and SailPoint kind of work together and complement each other. So using Azure Active Directory for B2B scenarios involves adding new entries into your existing Azure Active Directory tenant. And these entries are pointers to those user identities in their home tenant or other external identity stores, as we're showing there on the left. One of the key benefits is that Microsoft Azure Active Directory B2B leverages the security capabilities and policies that you're already familiar with in managing your corporate Azure Active Directory tenant. So examples of these features include things like security policy tools like conditional access that provide tools like multi-factor authentication, identity protection, role-based access to applications, and all these security policies you manage together in one central policy administration point for both your internal and your external user communities. Now, these new external identity entries really require a mature set of identity governance processes to manage the full external user lifecycle, including things like provisioning, deprovisioning, profile management, access recertification, and so on for these external users. And although Microsoft Azure Active Directory is really a top-tier cloud identity provider container for these users and has standards-based integration points for managing external identities, advanced identity governance capabilities needed for that full lifecycle deployment really requires an equally top-tier identity governance tool to manage these identity lifecycle activities. And SailPoint is recognized as that high-end identity governance tool that's going to provide you all those required administrative and user interface experience capabilities. So next, let's actually go in and see how we've put these together in a demo. So in this upcoming demonstration you're about to see, Alex Dunker is going to demonstrate exactly that, how SailPoint is used to manage those Azure Active Directory external identities and grant access to applications. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Frank. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Dunker. I'm a senior consultant with Edgile out of Dallas. Like Frank mentioned, we'll be going through some of the specific use cases that we've started discussing and show you them in live action. So here, I'll pull up the familiar SailPoint IdentityIQ interface. Many of your user populations are used to using this, and it will be quite familiar to them. We'll get started by inviting a new user identity. One thing I want to preface is that we'll be working with two different tenants today. Our core home tenant is what we call our Azure and SailPoint Healthcare demo tenant, and we have that here. And then as well, we'll be inviting users from our small partner demo tenant. So I'll open my quick link here under Manage Identity and choose Create External Identity Invitation. We'll go ahead and fill out the necessary information. We'll be inviting one of our partners, Norma, and her email you'll see here is with the small partner group. We'll go ahead and assign her the correct manager. And then as well, because we'll be demoing how we can automatically provision fine-grained access to tools like EHR, we'll go ahead and give her a job code and a location. We'll give her job code 7 and hospital 2. This means that she'll be a pharmacy type at hospital 2. We'll click next. Go ahead and confirm our registration, and that invitation will be sent off. So now we can bring up an example of what that looks like to receive the invitation. We will log in with one of our users from our small partner demo. And then be presented here with their normal office portal. We'll go ahead and log into their email. Now these email invitations that are sent out can be fully automated with the base template from Microsoft, or also be allowed to customize the template and use your own with the accept invitation link going directly to your app. So here we'll click accept invitation, and we'll be forwarded on to authorize the permissions that we'll be validating by accepting this invitation into the B2B org. You'll see here that there's some basic information that the tenant that we're joining will be receiving, and we can review that and then accept it. Directly after the invitation, Microsoft will actually forward us directly into our app. So this is our Agile MedNet app. It's supposed to be representative of an EHR app or an application you might find in your healthcare system. And we can now actually even sign in with the Microsoft account we just have. And now we'll see we're fully signed in. And we actually see that Kane here was given a master file of pharmacy with a template and a clinical subtemplate. So we can really show, not only are we going to be able to provide account access, but we can also provision that fine-grained access that you often find in your organization. We can actually jump right back over to our SailPoint IdentityIQ instance and kind of understand that, now that we have these external identities in our system, we need to make sure that we are managing them and certifying them. So I can pull up an example certification that we have running. And here's our external identity certification that we kicked off today. So I'll open it up as one of the managers. And we can review all of the access and accounts by our external users. So we see Kane. Yeah, we just had Kane. We wanted to approve that. We know Becky is still working, so we'll approve that. But Kristen, we want to go ahead and revoke that account. So we'll go ahead and save that and send that revoke. And we'll go ahead and sign off on our decisions. So now what's happening in the background is our tool will actually be going ahead and deprovisioning that access. So we can go ahead and head back to our application and show what that might look like. We're back here with Kane again in our Agile application, but we'll go ahead and sign out and then go ahead and sign in as a different user. Let me relaunch a different window. We can now sign in with a different account. We will sign in with one of the users that we actually just revoked. So we'll choose Mira here. Enter her password. We can now see that this user account was actually removed from our identity provider being the Azure and SailPoint Healthcare demo. So no longer can this small partner log into this application. Whether it's applications or data stores, we want to make sure that our external partners only have access to specifically what they need. And so why it's extremely important to be continuously certifying these users and making sure they have the correct access. And one last piece we'd love to show today is a bit about how we can help manage that fine-grained access. We know that many of our users and many of our clients had really struggled with maintaining how fine-grained access was provisioned in their organization, and hence we built the Healthcare Access Matrix. You'll see here that we built a tool to help manage these pieces. Many of our clients were managing this fine-grained access across spreadsheets, across tools, with no one central location to really manage this. We built this SailPoint plugin to be able to leverage the great parts of SailPoint Identity Governance and extend it to some of the specific use cases we saw in the healthcare space. Here you can see we have location and job code directives that actually match up directly with master files, templates IDs, and subtemplates. These are all directly manageable in the tool, and we can even ask the tool to auto-provision it. We can go ahead and look through our job codes and see here's some of our example student nurse job codes, which we can auto-provision, or perhaps some of our radiology, and they are specific to locations and the templates and subtemplates that they will receive. And that's how we can really help manage and provision directly that fine-grained access. So that's our demo for today. Just to recap kind of what we saw here today. We took a look at our user invitation process, which is directly integrated into IdentityIQ and then leverages the Microsoft Graph APIs to invite our end users. How a user might accept that external invitation from their organization and become directly productive in your application, no longer having to wait weeks and months to gain their access, but really that same day, almost instantly. And then as well, how we actually provision some of those access rights automatically, and specifically that fine-grained access that might be dependent on things like job code or location where they're working. And lastly, we showed some of that best-in-class access governance that SailPoint can provide. Because we do understand that external identities are a risk in our organizations, we want to make sure that we're very strong in that regard. And then finally, how we can use that tool to provision and deprovision our users from our organization. We want to ensure that there's no stale access and that when organizations remove users, that those are removed from our tenants as well. And so that's our demo today. And look forward to any questions you guys might have. I'll hand that back over to Tarun now to talk about and summarize some of those benefits we realized.
Thank you for the demo, Alex. I'd like to summarize the benefits of really using this integrated solution. So really by using this bring your own identity approach, we were able to reduce friction with partners and vendors. We were also able to quickly provision and deprovision of users in a matter of hours to days instead of weeks, as Alex mentioned. We were also able to address any of these audit findings that could potentially exist by automatically terminating the guest user access. We were also able to automate a lot of this EMR related access so that nobody had to maintain these spreadsheets going forward. We were able to certify any of these external user access. And really by using this integrated solution, make life easier for even administrators now that they're only using one platform going forward. We're now towards the end of the presentation. Thank you everyone for attending this presentation. I'd also like to point out that working with both our partners here, Microsoft and SailPoint, we do have some limited opportunity to fund any proof of concept or security program. So please definitely reach out to us if you'd like to talk to us more about your use cases or want to do a POC of this integrated solution. We're also now open for any questions that you might have. Just to get things warmed up, here are a couple of questions that our clients usually ask us. The first question which we usually get is this really applicable only to healthcare industry? Tanya, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure, I can take that. So you look at the healthcare example that was presented here, and we use Azure B2B to provide access to business partners, lab techs, student nurses, non-employed providers, contract nurses. So translate this to retail, manufacturing, government, small businesses. Every industry has partners, consultants, contractors, vendors, or even seasonal workers that they do business with. Do you want to maintain these credentials and passwords in your own organization? And for me, I always think about how will I be notified when a guest in my environment leaves the company that I'm working with? So with Azure B2B, that removal of access happens in the business partner's environment and is reflected in your own, just like we saw in the demo there. So any customer that has an Azure tenant should consider using B2B to provision users that are not employees, that are not customers or consumers, but who are those guests that are used to collaborate with people inside of your organization.
Thank you, Tanya. One question that's actually coming in is, where is really the healthcare industry heading as it relates to identity and access management, and any of the recent trends we've seen in the IM healthcare space during this COVID-19 times? Matt, do you want to take that?
Tarun, thank you. Yes, in fact, during the demo, one area and one trend that is rapidly accelerating was very subtly presented and demonstrated, and that's the need and the desire to have a tightly integrated governance strategy with provisioning. In the past, these not only were sort of disconnected strategies, but at times different solutions, one managing governance compliance processes and another managing provisioning. In healthcare, more than ever, it's become critically important to tie those together and solve those two problems through a single lens. If you're going to provision a clinician, you've got to understand, do they already have access, and I'm about to provision them additional access that might conflict or create some kind of toxic combination. And if I'm going to remediate access, and we think about COVID, a bunch of volunteers were brought in, a bunch of affiliated physicians and contract nurses. As we go and deprovision that access, as things try to settle or somewhat normalize, those permissions, we've got to make sure that clinicians no longer have access to applications and clinical data that they should not have access to. The only way you can effectively do that is if you had a good understanding of what they were provisioned to begin with. So having that integrated governance and provisioning capability. The second is around data and application, looking at those two challenges through a single lens. We talked about that earlier. And really the third is the rapid acceleration and adoption of cloud infrastructure, where before our healthcare customers were taking a methodical approach and they had a 3 to 5 year strategy to move to all cloud or all SaaS. That 3 to 5 years was no longer good enough. With COVID, forced them to accelerate their migration to cloud, whether it was infrastructure or critical applications, they wanted to move that environment to cloud. And SailPoint strategy is very complementary to that. We've got to support provisioning and governance strategies to applications that are on premise, to applications that are in the cloud, and of course the infrastructure and data containers that are cloud based. So really, those three trends are what we really see are accelerating here in the healthcare space.
Thank you, Matt. Larry, do you have any insights on what we've seen in the consulting space around this?
Just from an overall perspective, Tarun, yeah. So I mean, some thoughts around that as it relates, and specifically to healthcare. Goes back to kind of the higher level slide that I was presenting regarding some of the hype cycle and or future thoughts around identity coming from Gartner, is that this acceleration and compressing of something that many of the providers were considering over a course of years has put the providers in a very precarious situation, because the pandemic has kind of forced the revenue to go down because of elective care and elective surgeries, but they also need to make these investments to try and collapse the environment into remote workers and external identities in a way that it's secure and also being managed and governed very, very well. So it's just interesting what this pandemic has done. And like I said, especially to the healthcare organizations, I know they're in a tough spot right now trying to figure out exactly how to pull that together. So I don't know if we have any other additional questions, but Tarun, I'm going to turn it back to you, and I think we might have another question or two.
Yeah, Larry, there are a few more questions coming in, so let me read those out. One of the first questions we see here is, I'm from a healthcare organization. We're looking at B2C to manage patient identities. Are you suggesting a B2B solution? Frank, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, sure, Tarun. Yeah, that's a really good question. And in fact, I'm currently working a couple projects that are focused around B2C. And it really comes down to the nature of your vendors, suppliers, those sort of people, as well as your customers, or in this case, patients. When we have organizations whose partners tend to be other large organizations, they tend to be a little more mature. They tend to have things like Microsoft Office 365 and all the corresponding infrastructure already in place. And those tend to work better in a B2B scenario. Where B2C really comes in is when you have much less sophisticated organizations. Sometimes people's suppliers may be 2 or 3 people, working out of a garage, and they're not going to have the sort of things that a big supplier like a Walmart or those sort of companies do. So sometimes that will help us kind of decide what's the best solution, at least for the kind of suppliers. So we really kind of aim at what's the nature of the folks we're working with, and what kind of technology is going to work best for them. And now once we get into working with patients, that's really kind of that's more of a consumer identity. Some of our customers will actually do their partners and customers in B2C. Some will actually split them and do their partners in B2B and their customers in B2C. It also depends a lot on the kind of applications they're using. Some companies have completely separate applications for their users, customers, patients versus their suppliers. In that case, that's different than if you have applications where all these types collaborate together. So we really have to look at all those things, and I'll give you my best consulting answer, which is it depends. But both of those are actually really good technologies. They have their place. And one of the other things that's coming along, and Microsoft has just now got this into a public preview, is the merging of all types of external identities, both the partner type and the consumer into Azure Active Directory, and it's under the kind of title of Azure External Identities. So it's really early, but there's a really great vision for Microsoft to combine those two together. So yeah, there's I think a lot of recognition that those two really kind of do belong together, and there's a lot to come. So hopefully that answered kind of the questions as to where should these people be put directory wise. So back to you.
Thank you, Frank.
Just to add to that real quick, Tarun, to what Drew just covered on the B2C side, but I wanted to let everyone know that we're planning to have a B2C webinar in the future as well, so we can show you that perspective, not just the B2B, with the same kind of integrated solution, which would really be for patients and the customers that providers have as well. So go back to you, Tarun. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, another one that was similar to this one is, can this be leveraged with B2C identities? Frank, I think we answered that. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that piece?
No, those were kind of the two things rolled together.
Okay, great. Another one that I see coming in is, how does the licensing work in this model? Will partners consume any of our Azure licenses? Tanya, you want to take that on?
Sure, that is a great question, and I will start off the answer with, I am not a licensing specialist. However, I can say historically this was that 1 to 5. So if you had, for every one Azure license you had, you got 5 business licenses. But as Frank said, we are transitioning to a different licensing model when it comes to the external identities. And I think it's somewhere like you can have partner identities up to 50,000. So it does not consume any of your specific Azure licenses.
Great, thank you, Tanya. I also see another one that's coming in is the quick link from SailPoint used to invoke a form and invite an external party to log into the target app. I suppose that was developed separately and deployed to IIQ. Is there a cost for this feature? Alex, you want to take that question?
Sure, definitely can. So yes, you are correct. This was some additional development into IdentityIQ. However, this does use all out-of-the-box elements from IdentityIQ. So there is no customized code or altering of the core SailPoint product. There wouldn't be a specific cost around licensing for that feature. It's really something we'd want to take a look at implementing with you based on your needs with what information you'd want to onboard external identities with, and bring those into your joiner and birthright workflows.
Thank you, Alex. I think we've been getting a lot of B2B and B2C related questions, I guess, as everybody knows, those are 2 separate solutions. One question that's related to this is, would this also work with B2C along with B2B? Frank, can we do both together? You're going to provide some insights here for using the same solution.
Yeah. So it's a good question. How you use them together. The good thing is that federation technologies can really tie the two together. So I'm working with a customer right now who has their application tied to the Azure B2C directory, and what they've done, they've added, in their case, their workforce people who exist over in their corporate Azure AD, a method that when they sign in, they put in their username with their corporate credential, and B2C automatically recognizes that those users are federated off to their corporate Azure AD, signs them in there, brings them back to B2C, and then completes the remainder of the B2C journey. B2C has some really great capabilities around customized interfaces and look and feel that you can get pixel perfect exactly what you want user experiences. So they decided that using B2C as the main directory and federating to their corporate was the best approach for them. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you, Frank. Another one that I see here is, how have you solved for automatically revoking customer access when a user from that customer organization is terminated? Alexander or Frank, you want to cover that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the larger pieces is that, because you can build your applications and data to use the Microsoft experience with signing in using that Azure AD piece. When that user is deleted from their home directory, they'll no longer be able to authenticate into your applications, into your data from that is previously used. And so that was the main key to taking that away actually immediately. And then you can use whichever processes around the Azure backend or through your certification to pick that up into your portal.
Yeah, so this is Matt. Can I just maybe two pieces of color on terminations? In addition to the method that you saw in the demonstration, the reality is a lot of healthcare organizations also manage their identity populations through a variety of different authoritative feeds. It's not uncommon with business partners that there's some kind of authoritative feed, whether that's an application or even some kind of scheduled flat file. So one example was a scheduled termination where we know this business partner or this affiliate is no longer going to need access on this date. Scheduled, our system sees that termination date, and upon the date of termination, access is deprovisioned. Clinical systems, you typically don't actually get rid of the account. You block the account because you need to keep it for HIPAA purposes. The other is that immediate termination workflow that you basically saw, but also revocation as part of an annual or weekly, monthly certification process. So if you're certifying access and you notice that someone still has access to a data storage container that they should no longer have access to, an application, an entitlement, you can revocate access as part of a scheduled certification as well. And we call that closed loop remediation.
Thank you, Matt. I know we are reaching out towards the end of our time here. Larry, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Tarun. Yes, so I think we covered all the questions. If you have any additional questions, feel free to continue to send those over. Per Tarun, we're up on time, but wanted to at least close out and thank everyone for your time today. Also, just another reminder, we plan on additional webinars through the end of the year here, and likely going into next year. But if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to anyone that's been involved today, and we'd love to help you out. Maybe in a private session. I had a couple different large providers reach to me during this session and ask for us to follow up with an additional meeting. So if you have anything you'd like to cover, please let us know, and we'll set up a separate meeting. And thank you everyone for attending today.